At my cousin's engagement, my mother announced my pilot career was nothing but a childish rebellion disguised as a career. 3 hours later, I landed in a private helicopter, stepping out in full uniform as the entire family watched from the garden in shocked silence. My cousin Maddie's engagement party was in full swing, fairy lights twinkling across the sprawling backyard of my parents' home. Mom's laugh, that specific one she used when talking about me to relatives, cut through the evening air. Natalie says she flies planes, but we've never seen her in a cockpit, Mom said, not bothering to lower her voice. I think it's like those Instagram models who pose in private jets they don't own. My brother James laughed loudest. Remember when she used to make paper airplanes and throw them off the roof? Same energy, just more expensive toys. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood frozen, fingers whitening around the metal rail as the conversation below continued, every word igniting a slow-burning fury in my chest. The Louis Vuitton dress I'd spent 2 months' savings on suddenly felt like a costume, another failed attempt to make them see me as successful. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Ryan's name flashed on screen, my co-pilot, and the only person who truly understood what I'd sacrificed to get where I was. ETA 45 minutes, his text read. Weather's perfect. You sure about this entrance? I typed back, more sure than ever. Plan is on. Straightening my shoulders, I descended the stairs, fixing my face into a calm mask. The party was beautiful. Maddie had always had impeccable taste. White roses and peonies cascaded from every surface, champagne flowed freely, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. The perfect backdrop for a proper family celebration, unlike my improper life choices. Maddie spotted me and waved, her engagement ring catching the light. Natalie, come meet David's parents. She looked radiant, following the exact path my parents had laid out. Stanford degree, job at a prestigious law firm, engagement to a surgeon by 30. The golden child of our generation. I hugged her, genuinely happy for her despite everything. You look stunning. As I mingled, the toasts began. Uncle Robert raised his glass to the happy couple. Aunt Patricia shared memories of Maddie as a child. My father spoke about the values of commitment and tradition. When the microphone came around to me, a courtesy I hadn't expected, I took it with steady hands. To Maddie and David, I said, my voice clear in the evening air. It's beautiful seeing two people supported and celebrated by their families. Not everyone gets that blessing. I paused, letting the words hang. May your journey together be as smooth as clear skies and as exciting as taking flight. A polite smattering of applause followed. My mother's smile tightened at the corners. She recognized the barb hidden within my words. I handed the microphone back and glanced at my watch. 7 minutes. I excused myself, moving toward the bar for another glass of champagne I wouldn't drink. My cousin Emma, the only family member who'd ever visited me at work, sidled up beside me. They'll never change if you don't make them, she whispered. They still think you're playing pretend. I know. I set down the untouched glass. That's about to change. The first hint was distant, a rhythmic thudding barely distinguishable from the music. Then it grew louder, unmistakable. Conversations paused. Heads turned toward the sky. The sleek black Bell 429 appeared over the tree line, rotors slicing through the evening air, the company logo gleaming on its side. The helicopter circled once above the party, wind from the rotors sending napkins flying and women clutching their dresses. It descended toward the large circular driveway just beyond the garden gate, precisely where I'd instructed Ryan to land. The look on my mother's face as she realized what was happening was worth every second of doubt I'd ever had. The helicopter touched down, its engine whining as the rotors slowed. The passenger door opened, and Ryan stepped out in his full pilot's uniform, captain's bars glinting on his shoulders. He scanned the crowd, spotted me, and gave a crisp salute. The entire party had gone silent, all eyes riveted on the scene. I handed my clutch to Emma, who was grinning wildly. Excuse me, I said to no one in particular. My ride is here. I walked through the stunned crowd, past my slack-jawed brother, past my father's frozen expression, past my mother who had completely lost her practiced society smile. At the garden gate, I paused, turned back to the assembled guests, and delivered the line I'd rehearsed 100 times. Sorry, I can't stay longer. I have to fly the Dubai royal family to New York tomorrow morning. Duty calls. With that, I walked to the helicopter, where Ryan handed me my own uniform jacket I'd stashed aboard. I slipped it on over my dress, the 4 golden stripes on each shoulder announcing what I'd never been able to convince them of. I wasn't just a pilot. I was a captain. As we lifted off, I looked down at the upturned faces of my family, dots of shock growing smaller as we ascended into the darkening sky. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one looking up. "You're insane," Ryan said over the headset, but he was laughing. That was the most dramatic exit I've ever seen. Was it too much? I asked, taking over the controls as we leveled off, San Francisco Bay sparkling below us. "It was exactly enough," he replied. "Their faces were priceless, especially your brother's." I thought his jaw would detach. I smiled, feeling the familiar calm that always came with being airborne. Up here, everything made sense. The controls responded to my touch with perfect precision. The navigational calculations aligned. Cause and effect, action and reaction, clean and predictable. Nothing like the messy, judgmental world of family expectations. Ryan and I had been flying together for 3 years, logging thousands of hours across 5 continents. We'd flown celebrities, politicians, and yes, actual royalty. Tomorrow's Dubai job wasn't a lie. We were scheduled for a 5 a.m. departure to fly Sheikh Hamdan's family to a wedding in New York. It was the kind of high-profile client our boutique aviation service specialized in, the kind my family had always dismissed as fictional. "They never believed I could do it," I said, banking the helicopter gently toward the private airfield where we were based. Every time I mentioned a flight or a client, my mother would change the subject. My father would ask when I was coming back to real life. As if I've been on some extended gap year for the past decade. Ryan adjusted his headset. "Why do you still care what they think?" It was a fair question. I'd built a life they couldn't begin to understand. Apartments in 3 countries, a 7-figure income, and the freedom to see the world from above. I'd earned every certification, passed every test, broken into a male-dominated field through sheer determination. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, a little girl still wanted her parents to put her pilot drawings on the refrigerator door. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just do." After landing and completing post-flight checks, we headed to our office to prepare for tomorrow's job. The operations room was buzzing with activity even at this late hour, flight plans being filed, weather patterns monitored, client preferences cataloged. Melissa, our head of client services, intercepted me on the way to my desk. "There you are. I've been trying to reach you." The McLean Aviation Award Committee called. "You're on the shortlist for Pilot of the Year." I stopped mid-stride. The McLean was the highest honor in private aviation, recognizing excellence, innovation, and leadership. I'd been submitting my flight logs and safety records for 3 years without making the shortlist. "Are you serious?" I whispered. She handed me the official email. "Announcement is in 3 weeks at the gala in London. They're especially impressed with the emergency landing you executed in Tunisia last year. The board wants you to speak about it." Ryan clapped me on the back. "About damn time they recognized that. You saved 16 lives that day." The memory of that flight, hydraulic failure over the Mediterranean, passengers panicking, finding an emergency landing strip through a sandstorm, flashed through my mind. I'd never been more terrified or more focused in my life. Wow. I scanned the email again to be sure it was real. "I need to sit down." In my office, I collapsed into my chair, the evening's events catching up with me. From the humiliation at the party to the dramatic helicopter entrance to this nomination, it was emotional whiplash. My phone buzzed with texts. Emma. OMG, that was legendary. Everyone freaking out. Helicopter, 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 Maddie. That entrance officially made my engagement party unforgettable. Not even mad you stole the spotlight. Call me. Then, unexpectedly, my father, we need to talk. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a demand. Typical. I set the phone down without responding and focused on tomorrow's flight plan instead. The Dubai Royals were notoriously punctual and expected perfection. I would not disappoint. Later that night, in my downtown loft with its wall of windows overlooking the Bay Bridge, I poured a glass of wine and let myself feel everything I'd suppressed at the party. The hurt, the anger, the vindication. The McLean nomination email sat open on my laptop, a validation that should have been unnecessary, but still felt vital. I picked up my phone and finally texted my father back. I'm flying to New York tomorrow, London next week. Free for lunch when I return. Bring Mom. I hesitated, then added a link to the McLean Aviation Award press release that had just gone public, announcing the nominees. His response came quickly, "We'll be there." 3 weeks passed in a blur of international flights, preparation for the awards ceremony, and careful avoidance of further family communication. Ryan and I flew the Dubai party to New York without incident, then continued to London, where I was scheduled to speak at an aviation safety conference before the McLean Gala. On the morning of my return to San Francisco, I woke to an email that nearly stopped my heart. The head of Atlantic Wing, the largest private aviation company in the world, wanted to meet while I was in town. They were expanding their VIP division and had heard about my work with high-profile clients. By the time I landed at SFO, I had a lunch meeting scheduled with Atlantic Wing and another, more uncomfortable meal planned with my parents the following day. As I collected my luggage, I spotted my mother's latest social media post, a shared article about the McLean Awards with the caption, "So proud of my daughter, always reaching for the sky." Red heart airplane, the hypocrisy was breathtaking. She'd never once expressed pride in my career until it had public recognition attached to it. Now suddenly I was worthy of a hashtag. The Atlantic Wing meeting went better than I could have hoped. They offered me a director position overseeing their entire West Coast operation, triple my current salary, equity in the company, and my own fleet to manage. It was the kind of opportunity pilots dreamed about, the culmination of every sacrifice I'd made. "We need your answer within the week," the CEO said as we shook hands. "This position won't stay open long." I promised to consider it carefully, my mind already racing with possibilities. With a job like that, I'd never again have to prove myself to anyone, least of all my family. Which brought me to the following day's lunch. I chose a restaurant on the top floor of the Salesforce Tower, partly for the spectacular views that reinforced my connection to the sky, partly because my father, a real estate developer, had tried and failed to secure offices in the building. Petty? Perhaps. Satisfying? Absolutely. They were already seated when I arrived, my mother in her Chanel suit, my father rigid in Brooks Brothers. Their expressions were unreadable as I approached. "Natalie," my mother said, rising to air-kiss my cheek. "You look professional." I was wearing my dress uniform, Atlantic Wing's offer letter tucked in my briefcase beside the McLean nomination package. "That's the idea," we ordered, making stiff small talk about Maddie's wedding plans and the weather in London. When the appetizers arrived, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Your entrance at the engagement party was inappropriate," he said, cutting directly into his carpaccio. "You embarrassed the family." I set down my water glass carefully. Interesting perspective. I felt pretty embarrassed myself, hearing my family mock my career to the entire party. "We weren't mocking," my mother began. "Playing with toy planes," I quoted. "Instagram models posing in jets they don't own." Should I continue? My father's jaw tightened. We were concerned. "You've been telling us about this flying career for years, but we never see any evidence. I laughed, the sound sharp even to my own ears. I sent you my pilot's license, my captain's certification, photos from every continent I've flown to, links to articles about flights I've commanded. What would count as evidence, exactly? We just want you to be successful, my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. I am successful. You just decided my version of success didn't count because it didn't match what you wanted for me. The truth hung between us, heavier than the fog rolling in over the bay below. My father looked away first, his focus shifting to the panoramic windows and the tiny airplanes visible in the distance, coming in for landing at San Francisco Airport. The McLean nomination, he said finally. That's significant. Yes, and this Atlantic wing position. It's legitimate. The question stung, even though I'd anticipated it. Would you like to see the offer letter? Should I have them email you directly to verify? My mother flinched at my tone. Natalie, please. We're trying. Now you're trying. After I've already succeeded without your support. I opened my briefcase and placed the Atlantic wing offer on the table. Triple my current salary, which was already in the mid-six figures. Full benefits. Equity. A corner office in this very building, actually. My father's eyes widened slightly as he scanned the numbers. I could practically hear his mental calculations, recalibrating my worth according to the only metric he truly respected: money. This is impressive, he admitted. I know. I took the letter back. I've been impressive for years. You just weren't paying attention. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. We always wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected gently. You wanted what was most comfortable for you. What fit your narrative about who I should be? There's a difference. The waiter brought our main courses, the brief interruption giving us all a moment to collect ourselves. When he departed, my father surprised me by reaching across the table for my hand. I saw the video, he said, of the Tunisia landing. I stared at him. The footage of that emergency landing had been part of my McLean nomination package, but it wasn't public. How did you? I called in some favors, he admitted. Wanted to see for myself what all the fuss was about. I didn't understand half the technical terms, but I understood enough to know. He paused, clearing his throat. To know you saved everyone on that plane. Helicopter, I corrected automatically. It was a Bell 430. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Helicopter, then. The point is, I saw you in command. I heard your voice on the recording. You were exceptional. It was perhaps the first genuine compliment he'd ever given me about my flying. I felt a treacherous warmth spread through my chest and fought to maintain my composure. Thank you. We've been wrong, my mother added softly. We thought you were chasing a fantasy. We didn't understand that you were building something real, something remarkable. Why didn't you ever come see for yourself? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally escaping. I invited you to the hangar, to client events. I offered to fly you anywhere you wanted to go. They exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. We were afraid, my father admitted finally. Not of flying, but of being wrong. Of having to face that you succeeded by ignoring everything we taught you about what makes a stable, respectable life. The honesty was unexpected and disarming. For a decade, I'd imagined this confrontation, rehearsed cutting remarks and dramatic exits. But sitting here, looking at my parents' genuine regret, I felt the anger that had fueled me beginning to transform into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps understanding. I have an extra ticket, I said after a long moment. To the McLean ceremony in London next month. Ryan can't make it. My mother's eyes lit up. We'd love to, just one ticket, I clarified. You'll have to decide between yourselves who comes. It was a small olive branch, but it was all I could offer right now. A single step toward a different kind of relationship, not the unconditional reconciliation they might have hoped for, but the beginning of something new. My father nodded, accepting the terms. We'll be there. One of us, at least. As we finished lunch and prepared to part ways, my mother hesitated, then asked the question I could see had been bothering her. The helicopter entrance at Maddie's party, was that just to prove a point? I smiled, thinking of the night sky above San Francisco, of the freedom I'd felt lifting off from their perfectly manicured garden. Partly, I admitted, but mostly it was the fastest way to get from the party to the airfield. I had an early flight the next morning, remember. 1 month later, I stood on the stage at the Royal Aviation Society in London, accepting the McLean Award for Excellence in Aviation. The crystal trophy caught the light as I raised it, sending prismatic reflections across the audience of industry leaders and fellow pilots. This award honors not just one pilot, but the entire crew and support team that makes each flight possible, I said into the microphone. Aviation is never a solo endeavor, even when you're the only one at the controls. In the front row, Ryan applauded wildly. Beside him sat my father, his eyes suspiciously bright as he watched me on stage. He'd won the ticket in the end, my mother graciously conceding after he'd spent weeks researching everything about my career, trying to understand the world I'd built without them. 10 years ago, I was told that flying was just a fantasy, that I should pursue a more traditional path. I continued. To anyone facing similar doubts, I say this. The sky has room for all of us who are brave enough to leave the ground. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped down from the podium, trophy in hand, I saw my father rise to his feet, clapping with uncharacteristic abandon. When I reached him, he embraced me without reservation. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life, he whispered, or more proud to admit it. After the ceremony, at the reception overlooking the Thames, my father approached Ryan with an outstretched hand. Thank you for being there for her when we weren't. Ryan, ever diplomatic, shook his hand firmly. She would have succeeded with or without any of us. That's who she is. My father nodded, glancing my way. I'm beginning to understand that. Later, as we walked along the river toward our hotel, my father asked about the Atlantic Wing offer. Have you decided? It sounds like an incredible opportunity. Actually, I turned it down, I said, watching his expression carefully. Ryan and I are starting our own company. We've secured funding to expand our current operation, buy 2 more helicopters, and hire 4 additional pilots. His eyebrows shot up. You're becoming a business owner? That's unexpected. Is it? I smiled. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, after all. He laughed, genuinely delighted by the connection he'd never before acknowledged. I suppose you do. Well, if you need any advice on business expansion or property acquisition, I know who to call, I finished. Though I'm pretty sure I can handle it. I'm pretty sure you can too, he agreed, and for once, there wasn't a trace of doubt in his voice. As we reached the bridge, Big Ben illuminated against the night sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, not just the physical miles flown across continents, but the emotional distance covered between that silenced little girl with paper airplanes and the woman I'd become. The path hadn't been smooth or straight. I'd faced headwinds and turbulence, moments of near crash landing in my personal relationships. But like any good pilot, I'd kept my eyes on the horizon, adjusted for changing conditions, and trusted my instruments when visibility was poor. And now, standing next to my father who was finally seeing me clearly, I realized that the validation I'd sought for so long had mattered only because I hadn't yet fully validated myself. I didn't need their approval anymore, but it was nice, finally, to have it. Ready to head back? I asked as a light rain began to fall. Lead the way, my father replied. You always know how to find the clearest path forward. And I did high above the clouds, where I had always belonged. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who refused to see your success? I'm curious if anyone else has experienced the struggle of pursuing an unconventional path against family expectations. Sometimes the hardest part of success is deciding who gets to celebrate it with you.